Have you ever been in the middle of a conversation and you realize the other person isn't listening to you? Maybe they're distracted by something that's going on around them, or they're thinking about what they're going to say in response, or maybe they're just looking at their phone. It can be annoying or frustrating or even a little hurtful when you know you're not being listened to. And this is true whether the communication is between you and a friend or a family member, or even with God. For the last few weeks, we've been talking through some questions that sometimes we have about God, like, what do we do when we see injustice in the world? Or why is it that sometimes God feels so far away? Or why is it so hard for us to believe that God is good? Is it because there's so much evil going on in the world around us? And we have one last question to cover in this series, I've Got Questions. This is the question, God, can you hear me? We tend to ask this when we feel pain and hurt in our lives. We ask, God, are you listening to me? And it's especially important to know that it's okay to ask when life is hurting, is God listening? We talk a lot about prayer in the church, and this idea can be big and even confusing, but at the end of the day, I want you to know this. Every prayer is a conversation with God, and every conversation with God is a prayer. You can pray in a ton of different ways. You can pray using parts of the Bible. You can pray by repeating simple prayers you learned maybe as a kid, or by making up your own words as you go, or you can pray silently or out loud. You can pray with your eyes open or closed. You can give prayers of thanks to God. You can give prayers of praise to God. You can apologize to God. You can even ask God for help. And if we're honest, that's probably one that we use pretty often. And that's one of the ones that we're talking about today. Is God listening when I reach out, when I need something, when I'm in need? And if you want to know how to pray, you need to check out the book of Psalms. The Psalms are ancient Hebrew poems, but a lot of these are conversations with God. So they're prayers. And when you look through here, sometimes the writers of the Psalms are celebrating good parts of life, but other times they're going through difficult things. And the Psalms sometimes deal with heaviness and difficult situations, and they help us process these questions like, why am I going through this? Where is God when I'm in the midst of this pain? And is God really listening to me? Psalm 91 is one of the Psalms where the writer of the Psalm is balancing and going back and forth between really experiencing some difficulties and some deep pain, and then asking questions and wondering where God is, and then praising God in the midst of the difficult things. And I don't know exactly what the psalm writer was going through when they wrote Psalm 91, but they talk about things like enemies and disease and fear and attacks and armies and even death. And even though he's hurting, he manages to write a prayer declaring that even in difficult times, God protects. God gives us rest. God is safe. God can be trusted. God will rescue us. God cares for us. God is powerful. God is with us. And God, most of all, is listening. A long time after the Psalms were written, a man named John, who was one of Jesus' closest followers, wrote these words. In 1 John chapter 5, verse 14, it says, "And this is the confidence that we have before him," talking about God, "that whatever we ask anything according to his will, he hears us." See, John says that we have confidence that God hears us. John's confidence comes from a deep place of trust. He has a long relationship walking side by side with Jesus, and he knows Jesus deeply, and he understands how Jesus cares for him, cares for us, and how Jesus is there for us. Jesus listens to us. When we go through difficult times in life, the pain, the hurt, they tend to make us feel more isolated than we really are. So if you've ever wondered when life hurts, is God listening? You need to know that the answer is yes. And even when our prayers are full of anger and hurt and accusations, God is still there, patiently, lovingly listening.